Welcome back to Venturing On. You probably have never seen me. My name is Cynthia, and we are testing out to co-host a new series called Failing Forward with David. David unfortunately can't make it today, but we have an amazing guest entrepreneur that we would like to introduce all of you to, Kwaku, who will be telling us a couple different stories about his journey on Navi and some of the challenges he had to navigate. Kwaku, will you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us what you do at Navi?
Yeah. Hi, Cynthia. Excited to be here and share my story. So, my name's Kwaku. I'm currently a co founder and the CTO of a company startup called Navi. And we've been working on Navi going on 3 years now. Navi is my fourth startup. Yeah, for a startup in about 10, 11 years. So we've been rolling through them, which is good.
And I'm really curious about that because I know a lot of people talk about finding the right problem to solve. What was that process for you, either that is Strength Portal or Navi or some of the other startups that you've joined? How do you know or how do you make sure that you found the right thing to solve for?
It's always challenging to find the right thing to solve for. And I think that's part of the process is identifying the core problem before you start to, build, before you start to um,
Committing resources.
exactly commit resources. And that was one of the struggles of my first startup where we were so young and new to the world that we started building right away. And ultimately, while that I gained a lot of great experience in just execution and production, which is definitely a part of the startup journey. We were building in the wrong direction. Make it something specific to start, something that, if it's if it even if the audience doesn't seem like it'll scale, it's still better to solve a small problem or a pressing problem for a small audience than it is to try and guess at a problem for a large audience.
What did it feel like when you found out that you were solving for the wrong problem? And what is the process that you had to go through with the co-founder to say, like, hey, we need to stop doing what we're doing now and pivot to something else that people actually want or people will actually pay for?
It's so that's a challenge too. And fortunately for me, I've been surrounded by fantastic teams across all my startups. So that's important because there's a collaboration, there's a synthesis that needs to happen in terms of everyone aligning on the vision, everyone understanding that, hey, maybe we're not solving the right problem right now, so we need to adjust. And those conversations can be difficult. Sometimes they can lead to fights and arguments across a team that aren't productive. So that's the first part, is having a good team that is willing to listen and wants to collaborate and make progress, even if your mission changes. That's one thing. But then also just trusting the data. And even though the data might be limited in a startup capacity because you haven't grown, you haven't gotten those feedback loops that scale. You can still trust the insights that you're gaining from prospective customers and prospective users. So talking to these people early on is so vital because they will give you the insights. Sometimes they'll tell you exactly what it is, their problem that they're having and what you need to solve. So I'd say those two things. Just knowing that you have a team that's flexible and ready to kind of adjust and align in the right direction, and then knowing that you're interfacing with prospective customers or users, and listening to them, actively listening to understand what their problems are instead of projecting what you think their problems are.
That must be really difficult when you think you've had such a great idea that um, a product that will solve a certain problem, and then you go to your customer, and it's probably a very humbling experience for them to tell you like, yes, this is a problem. This is not one of my top problems, and I don't really care for this.
And that's the thing too, is kind of reading the signals in the noise. Is when you're talking to customers, that oftentimes people want to be nice, right? And so it's really, that's where it comes down to not projecting, not sharing what you think the problem is and what you're trying to solve, but instead really just asking the right questions to get the insights from the source without influencing them or biasing what they're saying. And that's a strategy that we've developed and is a part of Navi in terms of just how we train ourselves and our users on how to find the right problem to solve. And at the end of the day, you have to be willing to listen to those insights. And if you notice that you need to adjust, change course or pivot in some way, that's okay. I think startups, there's that misconception that, it's it's built in a day. Like you just do it right the first time and all
And
of a
it's
sudden
great and just no challenges on the way. Like
right.
once you find that problem, everything is smooth sailing.
It's easy from there, right? Exactly. But that is absolutely not the case. And that's been the way for the 4 startups I've been a part of, is that, the mission, the vision might stay the same, but the actual way you work towards that vision, the course is always different.
During your time at any of these 4 startups, because we just talked about all the non-pretty part of startup life, has there been a moment or multiple moments where you just want to give up and, I don't know, move to a corporate job that you get paid every 2 weeks? And if so, how did you put yourself back into this startup mindset?
I think in every startup thus far, there's been that situation. I remember, my first startup, I was working a couple jobs on the side just to try and make ends meet. And when I realized that I was working more on those jobs than I was on my own startup, that was hard. It was hard because it felt like we were failing, and my expectations were so high that I I was putting a lot of pressure and stress on myself. The way I got myself through these things is understanding that I wanted to make these changes. I think as entrepreneurs, as innovators, there has to be some passion, some motivation, intrinsic motivation to solve this problem and be persistent and persevere through all the challenges. And so if you're in the right space, if you care about the audience, if you feel great about the team that you're working with, those are all strong signals to say, hey, if some sort of adversity hits, then we can roll through it.
Kind of dovetailing on that, when you're having a bad day now or having a lot of rejection from the customer in one day, what are there any rituals that you or the team does together that to shake that feeling off, or how do you all usually deal with those emotions?
That's a really good question. I think it's different depending on the team and the people that you're working with. Right now with Navi, I think we do really good. We have experience with each other from a prior startup, so that helps knowing that, hey, we've been through these challenges before, a flavor of these challenges before, and we've gotten through it. So having friends in that sense there is really useful. But then also just understanding that work is still work. So we make sure that, um, I don't even think we make sure, but we just do this where before our team syncs, when our team syncs start, the first 5 or 10 minutes are just, chatting about things that are going on. We're cracking jokes, we're talking about things that happened recently. So it really lightens the mood and makes sure that we're all aware that whatever is happening in our startup isn't the end all be all. So if we feel like we're struggling through a challenge at work, we know that it's okay. This is just in the scope of work. There's more going on.
Is there a big mistake that you've made throughout this startup journey from all the four startups you've worked at that you still remember to this day and that you will always remember and tell all your friends about it so that they don't make the same one?
Oh goodness. I mean, there's a lot of them that I've probably kept in the closet to avoid talking about. Two come to mind, one with my first startup and one with Navi. So, with my first startup, we had a couple customers and they had data with us, right? And all of a sudden, our systems weren't really up to par. They just weren't great. I had built it. That was my first time building a tech stack, and I didn't do very well. And so we had to do a database migration. And implementing the database migration, I found this was going to take like weeks if we were going to do this correctly. And I just was so overwhelmed. I was like, oh my goodness, what is going on? I didn't want to tell my teammates because it was just like, it was a complete failure on my end. And ultimately, we got through it. The way we did get through it is by asking for help. So understanding that, hey, even if this is, my startup, my thing, I'm the technical co-founder, so I should be able to handle it. There's plenty of people out there that are willing to help and have probably been through something similar. So sharing that experience with them um, sooner than later helped us navigate through that database migration, and it eased some of my stress that I just had by myself, thinking, "Oh, I'm in this alone. I don't know what I'm doing." So that was that was one situation there. Glad it didn't take down that business. But the case with Navi most recently was kind of similar. I think we touched on it a little bit already, just building before we knew what to build. But I think the challenge we ran into with Navi was that we were so excited to build. We had a case of what to build for, but it wasn't what we wanted, and we didn't take the time to do the research around that audience. And so ultimately we ended up building this prototype very quickly, and it's still being used today by customers, which is fantastic. But there's so much technical debt built in there because we were just building on top of what we were doing over and over again for about a year, where now we're at the point where we have to call it a prototype. We have to call it a test because there's no way I would be willing to support this as our production commercial stack. Ultimately, we do wonder how much of our resources we spent on the prototype when maybe we could have taken our time before actually building anything.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think what I heard was one, asking for help as soon as you find a big problem, and then the second one is overall from everything else you've said as well is to not have any sort of prejudice or bias when you talk to customer and really trust the data in a very objective sense and not putting your ideas anywhere in when you're just collecting information.
That's spot on. Yeah, those two takeaways are really foundational, fundamental to the approach we've kind of documented in terms of how to go from 0 to 1.
And before we depart, can you share with our listeners one fun fact about yourself?
Yeah, let's see. I love sports, so I've been getting into golf recently. I'm terrible at it, but I'm only a year in, and it's a game that I hope to be playing for 30, 40 years to come. So that is something that you'll catch me doing all of the time. And then one that comes to mind, just because this usually happens in the morning, is I love oldies music. So oldie soul, Bill Withers, Lovely Day. If you catch me singing that, you probably will, because that is my wake up song every morning. So it's I appreciate that old school music. Yeah.
Well, Kwaku, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your time with us today. Best of luck on the rest of your development, and we look forward to following your progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is great.